recording this right now. I believe papers were returned, correct? So you've got a lot of your grades now, right? You've got 3 out of 4 exams. You've got the big paper. You've got the smaller stuff. This is a time generally when people, I told everybody I would be gone or something. I don't know. I got a ton of emails again about the exam, but even though I extended it a day, there is a makeup day. So December 7th is when we open up exams 1, 2, or 3, makeup versions. And then for 24 hours, you can take one of those if you missed one exam. It's not a replace scheme. I'm not sure. I've never done that, but it's not like a makeup for it. It's if you missed it for any reason, which you can miss one test for any reason. Literally, you can be purposefully skipping class on exam day. And you have no anxiety and no documentation from anybody, and you just want to skip class on that test day. You could do that if you're not prepared. But now you cannot do that. Okay, so we do not have a cumulative final. We have exam 4, which is going to be over chapter 10, or maybe it's 9, I can't remember, but it's our 9th module, 10th chapter. Oh my gosh. When I was doing that module stuff this summer, working with the specialist, I was like, can't I just call this the 10th module for the 10th chapter? And she's like, well, it's the 9th module. And I'm like, yeah, but that's going to confuse people. Maybe it just confuses me. Anyway, so chapter 10 on gender and chapter 17 on the environment. And a lot of that information is coming from my SOC 220. Okay, so a lot of that is not in our textbook. The information that's in my slides, I'm going to make sure to cover that, even though I already have, and people are watching those videos, and that's great. I think I'm going to lecture a bit about that and do discussion piece as well. And then we will be there, okay? So this is this week, chapter 10. Next week, chapter 17. And then we're out. And our finals are going to take place, it's this week, chapter 10 and 17, in addition to next week, maybe the first day. The second day, I believe we have our exams, right? Or something like that. Is that next week? Yeah, next week, our exams. And the reason I do that is because, and you can check announcement, that has all the dates. The reason I do that is because I don't do a cumulative final. So I want you to be done and then have finals week for your other classes. So like instead of, in the past, now it's all online, but in the past, you do this test or you would do a whole semester in my classroom at a certain time, and then they schedule the final for another time. And I think that's okay, but people take a class at a certain time for a certain reason. Anyway, so that final test will be done. So after the end of next week, we're done. You're done here. I know. So sad. In capital letters. So sad. Sociology is over. Okay. Well, one more thing before we move on. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. That's right. That is the Star Wars tree. Now, I will have to get a close-up on it for you, but for the last 25 years, my mom has been buying me all the Hallmark ornaments, literally for 25 years, and boom, since 1995. So I think we've got over 130 Hallmark Star Wars ornaments on this puppy. Everything from Jabba the Hutt that talks to Princess Leia in her controversial bikini outfit. We also have Princess Leia in the New Hope outfit and in the Bounty Hunter outfit as well, which is not as controversial when she's killing people, I guess, as when she's half naked. All right, so let's start. We're going to start the chapter on gender. First of all, though, Yua, thank you, Yua. Don't forget extra credit opportunity, which is due to, the extra credit is due today? All right, I'm going to extend that. With a wave of my magic hands, because we're not there yet. We're not close. I think between my classes, we got like 3,000 pounds of food. I want 5 minimum, and I've got plenty of classes. So I'll go change those dates right after class, Yua. I'll extend that to the end of next week. So if you haven't gotten on that train yet, please do. And if you want to share that link, like I said, my mom would like spade or neuter like 5 or 6 dogs a year for people that didn't have the money to do it, just because she's like truly a saint. So, if you have relatives like that are looking for an opportunity to do good and you want to help out our class at the same time, you can pass on that link. And I think I've said that, but all right. So yeah, check Canvas, but you make a good point, Yua. Why not jump in now? Like, why not just do this today? Don't wait any longer. Now, remember, if you're really strapped right now for financially, then you can write a 2-page single-space paper on poverty and homelessness in Northern Colorado. People have done that. We will grade that. You will get the same amount of points as anybody else. This is never a pay for points type of a thing. This is a how much sociology can we do in 4 walls of a classroom or in several walls in your house. Not as much as we can do if we somehow extend ourselves out into the community, right? You know where we're at. All right, any questions? I'm just gonna sip my coffee here because I have excellent coffee and I've just been talking for 10 minutes straight. I'm gonna do this. Solar Roast, Colorado company, Peruvian coffee. This is the best right here. All right, no questions, really? All right, if you have anything about the exam, contact Verena or Yua. Wow, I don't know. You're lucky this semester. The GTAs are awesome. Yua, I love you. Verena, I mean, it's like this is the all-star game or unit of all of my classes. I don't tell the rest of my classes. This goes up on my YouTube. I don't think my other GTAs have time to watch the videos, but this is. They always, Yua. I'm just gesturing this way because you're over there in my box. But you're absolutely wonderful and fantastic, and in every single way the people are of this class are lucky to have you grading their papers and helping them with their writing and being organized. Yeah, I think some of us fantastic teachers that lack organization. See, that's where I was going with that. Some of us that lack organization. Really are helped out by amazing folks like you. So thank you again this semester. You're the best. All right. So I want to start off, and I know it's early, but that's why I worked everybody into it by talking for 11 minutes straight. We are going to discuss this morning, and that's kind of how we're going to start this off. This piece is on gender, or this chapter. So I want us to be thinking about all sorts of things. And we're all over the place with this individually. To some people, and I'm going to ask this question, does your gender matter to you? How does your gender matter to you? And what are some hang-ups? Like, what are some ways that gender is changing? And what are some hang-ups that people have with that? And yeah, I'm pointing at you, older generation, since you're always pointing at my students. And me, back when I was Gen X, we were skateboarding everywhere and they were barring us from being places for the very first time. Woo, we scared a lot of people. I hope you are too. It's always good to scare old folks. Oh, I know, that's ageism. Anyway, it's good to keep elderly folks on their toes is what I mean. What kind of problems does society or hang up have with the fact that gender isn't like it was in the 1950s or even 60s or even 1980? And believe me, cleaning out my dad's place in my mom's house, I found a lot of pictures of this guy right here in some short shorts and some tall socks from the 1980s. A lot of 80s pictures there. All right, 90s, 2000, all of a sudden, and I can say this, we want to make these observations sociologists, but I'm thinking to myself, like, how much gender dynamics has changed since I started teaching. Since I stepped into college 13 years ago and started working with college students, like gender and my student makeup of gender has totally changed. And so, yeah, that's what we want to talk about today is let's get into this. And let me flip back here. You can't see this, but to my tab. So does your gender matter to you? And yes, a lot, not much. What does your gender matter to you? Sometimes we find that like things about ourselves matter more to other people, like, does it matter more to other people? Let's look at that right now. And I know that's a weird question. Jason, gender matters for everyone. I know, but not really, right? Like in some ways, yes, but in some ways it's like race. If I say, what does your race matter to you? Or how do you feel about that? A lot of people just not at all. So somebody answered yesterday and was like, not much or whatever it was. And they're like, I probably feel bad or I'm saying the wrong thing, but none of these answers, are wrong unless they come from a place of lack of empathy and hate and non-compassion. But everybody has a different thing about that. Some people, okay, so I'm just going to turn you loose. And I know it's early. But what do you think as far as gender? Does your gender matter to you? How much or why? Whatever you feel comfortable sharing. All right. Speaking of gender, I just saw this on my desk that my son put here last night. We've got some real gender masculinity issues to talk about here with He-Man. but besides the obvious, besides He-Man being swole, especially for 1980s, what do you think? Does your gender matter to you? Why? Why not? A lot, a little?
My gender matters to me a lot, and it didn't used to when I was younger. I'm 36 now, and when I was, 18, 19, it didn't matter to me as much, and I didn't understand the ways in which my culture taught me to objectify myself and oppress myself because of my gender. And I sort of felt like because I was female, I was like second rate, and I had to do things that men would find appealing, and I had to be cooler than the other girls and all of that stuff. And I didn't really see the issue with that. And now that I'm older, I realize like, wow, I was kind of ashamed to be female, not outright, but like in the ways that our society sort of tells us that it's like not quite as good. So it matters to me a lot now. It didn't used to, and I wish it had more back then.
Awesome. Great response. Thank you. All right. Who else? Does matter. And so when your name came up, it's got the she, her, hers. And it's interesting because as we talk about gender, it matters, and that's one of the things that we've seen in a big heightened way. So, also, over Thanksgiving break, Thanksgiving is the time of sociology. The holidays are the time of sociology. Why you? I see people smiling already, because you find yourself in situations, even this year, right? I mean, we saw how many people traveled, how many people are going to go back with their families and stuff. So let's just say that's a thing that happens, right? And so that's when we get into all these discussions with relatives about all sorts of things that we talk about in here all the time. Somebody yesterday was sharing that a relative had a trouble like with them signing all their emails, she, her, hers, or whatever. And it brought up like this gender discussion because this person from an older generation was like, why bother? So we can include that in our discussion as well. Some of you may have run into some interesting gender pieces just within the last handful of days. But anyway, as it relates, I always find it's funny. People ask me what I do, and I say I teach sociology, and they're like, what do you teach about? And my general response is, well, everything that your parents tell you when you come home for a holiday not to talk about, that's what we talk about every single day. War on drugs, racial inequality, gender issues. It's like it is really exactly all of that, right? Okay, so other folks, does your gender matter to you? Yes, no, why?
I'm gonna say no. Like, I don't know. It's really weird because you don't really think about it every day, but I would personally say no until certain moments like come up where I'm saying no, I don't really care that I'm a female, or I don't really care about my gender until, you're a girl walking by herself on a college campus, and then you're like, oh, this isn't super fun being a girl. But minus that, I would just say no. I don't really think about it that much. But also when you're bringing up people talking about why do I have to sign away like she, hers, and hers and all that, I didn't really realize how broad of a spectrum it was, honestly, until I came to CSU, because all these surveys I fill out and all these different information things that I fill out, the list is just so continuous for who you can be. And I just thought that was really cool because I didn't really know there was such a spectrum. But for me personally, I wouldn't say it matters all that much to me. But as you were bringing up Thanksgiving, it's interesting to me though, because I work in fast food and I work at the Freddy's at CSU, but we now cannot say like, hi sir, or hi ma'am, like, what can I get for you today? Because people get offended now, which was really interesting to me, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Wow, there's so many things there. Somebody had said yesterday, so I want to ask this question of you, Mackenzie, and I know this sounds like a weird question to everybody, but somebody said this yesterday. It sort of sounded like what you said. The question, or what somebody said yesterday is, she said she identifies as a gender female, and she said, hey, if tomorrow I woke up and I was a boy, I would just go about my business. Like it literally wouldn't matter to me. Do you feel like if tomorrow that was the case, which we know isn't, but if that was the case, it would be more like, well, okay, here we go from here on out.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
again, I know that defies reality, but when this person said that the other day, I was like, huh.
yeah, I mean, I'd probably be lenient about it. I'd probably be super freaked out, but I mean, no, I like being a girl personally. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'd probably just go with the flow of it.
All right. So the great thing that you brought up was really that college, and I think is true, and it's what's happening now in culture, and it's also college, right? Where all of a sudden you have a few of these spectrums, and then now it is a much broader spectrum, and I have seen that particularly with gender over the last several years in a way that my students are identifying not in a binary way, but it's way past binary. Like we're not even talking 2, 3, 4 anymore. It is a really, I think, much more in depth, much more personal way to identify, and it's interesting to me. And we'll get to that. So much stuff to talk about with this chapter, but I'll let you talk for a minute. But we'll get back to that birthing piece that we had mentioned before. The gender piece before we truly know gender, right? All right. So what else? Does your gender matter to you? Why or why not? Or how? We are having all sorts of folks share, but I'd certainly love to hear if anybody here identifies as gender male. When we do this chapter, it definitely gets quiet from that perspective, historically speaking, as I sample past populations of students. What do you think?
I definitely agree with Mac. Like, I didn't really like care that I was a female until like again being on a college campus and it's I have to walk back to my dorm from my friend's dorm and it's it's kind of dark outside and I call somebody so I look busy. And then I also noticed cuz my sister just bought a Jeep, but she was looking for months and she was like on these websites and like emailing and talking to these people who wouldn't get back to her, and then she had her boyfriend go and contact the same people and they would reply to her like him and not her. So that
this is
yeah.
like genderized Jeep culture.
Yeah, and it was just like she's looking for like car parts and stuff because she's working on it, and there are people who don't really like treat her the same as they like treat her boyfriend because she's like, oh, like I'm busy at work, can you go pick him up? He's like, oh, sure. And he was like, oh, they were so nice. And she was like, well, I talked to them on the phone and they weren't that nice. So it's just interesting to see that.
All right. So yeah, some gender differences in the way people are treated. When we first moved to town, good story here that kind of piggybacks on that. My partner, Julie, is an artist, but she also welds. And so she was going in when we first moved here and we went over to Air Gas, and welding stores and Air Gas stores are very male, very, very male stores. And she went in there and she was walking around with me for like 15 minutes. And I really wasn't paying all that much attention because I'm like, I don't care. And the guys came up to me, 2 different guys came up to me twice and asked if they could help me. And I was like, I don't weld, but my wife does. And they literally walked back to the counter. So this is now 15, 20 minutes we're in this place. And Julie's about to buy $600 or $700 worth of stuff, if not more. Oxyacetylene tank, oxygen tank. I don't even know what they're called. MIG, TIG, RIG. They're like the different welding types. I know you're laughing at me, James. This is where I'm okay having a gender role that's not so male or masculine. And anyway, so finally the guy comes up to her and he says, you gonna be buying some stuff? And she's like, turns to him and she's like, yeah, I need a whatever welder with this kind of tips and access to, but she laid out this whole like welding, because she was also a sculpture major in college. She's been welding for years and years and years. Bronze casting, you name it. And he was like, oh, and I mean, and I will say this, they instantly, the whole place, light switch flipped. And they went out of their way to help her, and they were super awesome. And every time she went in there, it was like, how fast can we help you? And so I will say that it's interesting, especially when you find yourself trying to deal with a genderized situation where you know you're being treated differently like that, where it's just obvious that it's kind of like, well, you wouldn't know you wouldn't know the difference, but I wouldn't know the difference between that, right? But they're looking at Julie and saying that. So yeah, really, I'm just gonna say interesting. We'll break down some of that, those gender pieces, but good. Storm, are the chickens okay? All right, we haven't lost a baby chicken now since in quite some time. So I just gotta get the chicken report every morning from my man Storm. All right. Anybody else? Does your gender matter to you? Yes, no, and how?
I would say that my gender does matter to me. I realized it when I had to do a Socratic seminar like last year. And the question was, is sexism still a problem in our society? And all of the guys in my class tried to say that it is, but only for men. And it was really interesting. And I really realized that like gender does matter because they could only pull from their own experiences and they couldn't really see from a woman's perspective of what they really have to deal with. And it was just really interesting. Like gender does matter for sure. Yeah.
I wish it's so great, Gabby, because like when you said that, everybody's eyebrows in the first two rows went like,
yeah.
In unison, everybody's eyebrows just went like,
what?
Yeah. But yeah, and so right, this is what we come back to over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. Of course, if you identify as a gender male, you don't know, right? You're living in your set of experiences. So there's that, right? But then there's also that piece, which is, and we say this, I reinforce this pretty consistently in sociology, which is, how do we know what the experience of somebody in this culture is who identifies as gender female? How do we know how a transgender member of this community feels or experiences life? I mean, the answer is, right, we listen. Over, and it's not like this massive puzzle. Like if I were to ask that question outside of the sociology class, people would be racking their brains trying to come up with like the answer to that. And the answer to that is the opposite of what we think, because particularly when we look at like a dominant race or a dominant gender, right, dominate the conversation, So it's like, for once, those people, whoever that might be, whatever that might be, need to not do that and just listen. And I think that that's a difficult thing in our culture. I mean, I see people, and I don't try to watch the news too much, but, talking over each other, yelling at each other, but not really having a conversation. But if we want to look at gender dynamics, the easiest thing for us to do to understand them is to listen. And that's for anybody, right? I mean, people who identify as a gender male need to listen to the challenges and bias and discrimination that goes on for folks that identify in the trans community or people who identify in different ways. We'll just say across the board, but particularly discrimination that those folks or people who identify as gender female feel and experience. And it is also important. Remember my example, and I was saying there were so many times, because I was the only dad like on the playground, when the boys were little, and then it would be like me and 10 moms, and we'd all be there, and I would like time again, too numerous to mention, kid would fall down, scrape its knee, the mom would lift the boy up and be like, don't cry, be a man. This is in 2005, 07, 2010, 2015. Again, you think you're past that, but really we got a lot of stuff in culture to look at. So people who are in a non-dominant gender or in a different situation, let's say, need to also understand the challenges that men face, right? Or how they play a role as well in toxic masculinity, like men play a role in the oppression or disadvantage of women in our culture, people who identify that way. So it is really important as sociologists that we look at all these things. If we want to sort of help rid the world a bit of toxic masculinity, it's not up to men alone, right? I mean, it's up to everybody to sort of purge that piece, and it's going to take everybody, because obviously women contribute in that way as well, just like the male gender. And look, everybody of all the different gender perspectives we're going to look at have the capability to contribute bias, right, to somebody else. Now, that doesn't mean that all those groups of folks have the proportionate set of power to be able to make that stick. So we know that, that's one of the ways in which it's different. How has your gender mattered to you in life, or how has it not? Again, let's just kind of keep going with this. And yeah, go ahead. I'll let you go for a second.
I thought it was really interesting that Lily and Mackenzie said that it didn't really matter to them, because that is just the complete opposite of me. I probably think about it every day. Like, I am so grateful that I am a woman. I would, no offense, I would never want to be a man, ever.
None taken. And thankfully, just like all people, like a politician doesn't speak for all white folks, I would not suppose to speak for all men.
But yeah, as like, it just, I probably think about like my sex every single day, just like from like what we've already said. Really, like if I go to the grocery store, I might like, just the other day someone took a picture of me at the grocery store. I thought that was interesting.
I'm very, that's,
yeah.
I'm not into that. That's the moment in which I grab somebody's phone and throw it. That's weird.
Or like if you're just like walking down the street with what other people said, or like even with like family, because specifically for me, I have like 4 older brothers, so it's a little different for me. So yeah, I would just have to say that I like think about it every day, and it is a huge factor in my life. So.
All right, good. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah. Anybody else?
I would say for me, like it matters a little bit, but like I like not like I don't go about like my day thinking about my gender like every day. So it's like it's not a huge deal to me because I don't think about it all the time, but I think it does matter like in certain like situations. But I did want to share like a funny story. It's like kind of a joke in my family now. So one time, so my dad he has 3 brothers and 1 sister, and they were like up at my grandparents' house doing like yard work and just like helping around the house. And it was like around lunchtime, and my grandma, she was like, "Oh, your sisters like can make you guys some sandwiches," like assuming that like my aunt was gonna make all of them for like all her brothers. So I just thought like it's kind of a joke like in our family now, because like my mom's like, "Why would your grandma say that?" Like just because it shows like how like the gender roles are like still kind of like prevalent.
Absolutely. It's like Little House on the Prairie stuff. The men folk will be out here working in the yard, while the woman folk, yeah. And look, if we are still dealing with the weight of slavery and systemic racism, institutionalized, right? Like for this long, gender differences, gender expectations, gender biases, absolutely in the mix. And so this kind of brings us to a good thing here, or to an interesting segue that we can kind of talk about, which is, how about those generational differences? They seem pretty intense to me. And my dad was a musician. I wouldn't call him a conservative guy. He was a lead singer, partier. Then he was a 5th grade teacher for 30 years. And that guy, and I may have mentioned this before, will be in the boat on the river. We go for a fishing trip for 1 week a year for the last, I think 17 or 18 years out of the last 20. And boy, you sit in a boat with either one of your parents there for 8 hours a day for a week. Whew! Yeah. You get to know each other. And we're fishing, and somebody will drive by, and it'll be like a woman driving the boat, and the guy, and I mean, this is like old school, they're like 50 or 60, and the husband's sitting there getting a ride, right? And the wife is driving, and my dad literally would yell out from the boat while we're fishing, "Finally letting her drive the boat, huh?" Something like that, right? My dad's an educated guy. He's an open-minded guy, but he comes from a generation where gender differences are so different. And now you can only imagine your teacher, Jason Downing, right, sitting in the boat with him, and he says that, and I'm just like, and then once they pass, of course, I like swivel around in my chair, and and then I give him the what for, right? Are we really going to have to talk about that? And of course we do. He's 80 years old. I don't let him off the hook for anything. I was back helping him out at the house. He's like, "I just don't like Kamala Harris or Kamala." And I said, "Well, first of all, her name is Kamala. Second of all, why?" "Well, she locked up a whole bunch of black folks." And I'm like, okay, we need to talk about this. So even at 80, I give him that, like, first of all, her job as a prosecutor, right? Second of all, she didn't determine these war on drug laws. Like, anyway, so my dad is a great example of somebody who is a well-intentioned person, and a really open-minded, great guy, and still, boom, those gender differences are like night and day sometimes that shock the shit out of me even. So why do you think, like, in what ways have you experienced that the older generation, yeah, I'm looking at you, older generation. Like I said, you're always looking at us, Gen Z, millennials, I don't know, Gen X. So why do you think there's such a hang up? Or what? Jason Downing the rescue. My dad knows that we get a break fishing, but if he's gonna go there, we're gonna go there. Like, so anyway, so all right, so what do you think? Why does the older generation, it seems generational to me. That doesn't mean that there aren't some really hip, understanding, very diverse people out there that are 70 and 80. We know that. But as a whole, it seems that any of these hangups come from other generations that have other gender expectations that are still more rigid, or I don't know, more set in stone. Oh, there we go, lighten up my camera a little bit. What do you think? Why is it generational? Why do those folks have a problem or have trouble adjusting? And in what ways, and why?
I think the internet has a lot to do with it. I think younger generations are more likely to connect with people that aren't necessarily right in their social circles via the internet. So younger people get a lot more exposure to different identities and different possibilities outside of these rigid gender roles. Whereas I think older people tend to be kind of stuck in what they were taught. My partner identifies as male, and he started sewing during COVID, just like as a new hobby. He went out and got a sewing machine, and he's been making me clothes. It's amazing.
Yes.
But it's really funny because when I tell like my friends, I'm like, oh yeah, Paul's sewing. They're like, oh, cool, But when I tell like my parents, or, when his parents talk about it, they're like, oh my God, Paul's sewing. It's amazing. It's just like this, it's weird. And they're just astounded that he's sewing. And it's the difference is really marked between the ages of people that find this out.
Yeah, that might be the funniest thing I've heard all semester long, as we come across all these major life bombshells. Oh my God, Paul's sewing. It's like you're waiting for like a different punchline, right? Paul's gay, Paul's a white supremacist, Paul's a prepper. Like, however you could finish that. Nope, Paul's just doing some sewing. He's making some clothes there for himself and for other people. Oh my God. Yeah, but that's great, because in the year 2020, again, right, like these would be things that we wouldn't think would be such a big deal. You've seen the boys maybe from time to time popping in through the back. They both had hair that was down to the middle of their back. And really, it was the cutest reason because my mom, when I was a kid, my dad wanted my hair to grow out longer. And then my mom was not into that because people would confuse me, right? Oh, well, is that a boy or a girl, right? That's a very 70s, 80s thing, I thought. And so I just had the boys have long hair for a while. And my rule in my house is whatever you want to do with your hair, do it, right? As a parent, that's not my hill to die on. You want to have purple hair and get a perm? Go ahead. You just get that purple perm. Anyway, they had really long hair. And then my mom would say to them, my mom waited for a while because she's a teacher, right? So she's smart. She loves the boys infinitely. And she said, so do you ever want to cut your hair, or why do you have your hair long? And my son Storm, I think it was Storm, he looked up at Grandma and he said, because my hero has long hair. And she's like, who's that? And he's like, my dad. And I was standing behind him with like 50s. I was like, yes, because it was the most awesome answer in the world, right? Like my mom was like thinking that he was going to answer because dad wants it long, because my hero has long hair. I was, seriously, that kid, I hooked him up for months afterwards. He had no idea why, and it was just the glorious thing. Anytime, even when you love your parents a lot, anytime you can be like, face, it's great. So fast forward to me, I've got boys. They're born in 2005 and 2007. Here I am on the playground in 2011 or whatever. And it was interesting to me because I'd go to the store with these guys, and Zion, particularly my young guy with the blonde dreads, he would have white blonde hair. So it's like shining. It's so bright, it's shining. And he's got a Spider-Man outfit on, 2 swords, an Uzi, and a camo outfit on top of the Spider-Man outfit. And people were like, she's so free-spirited. And I'd be like, I mean, this kid right now is putting out so much testosterone. Can you not taste it? Good God. But in the year 2010 or 2011 or 2015, it astounded me that people still look at long hair and just instantly think girl, and short hair and instantly think boy. And so as we talk about these things like sewing or even your hair length or stuff like that, it's bizarre how that continues to carry with it what we talk about, and we talk about sociological momentum, right? It carries that weight of moving forward that people put into it, you know? So interesting as we look at, that. Do you think that gender, and this is kind of a baited question, but I'm really looking for more substance here. Do you think that gender in the past, like for that 50s, 60s, 70s generation even, do you think that that was so much more rigid or so much more punishable or so much more, you know what I mean? Like what has really cemented that generation's binary thinking in terms of gender, you know?
This is more really about like sexuality instead of gender, but I feel like just up until recently it was okay to say words like you're gay as an insult or something, or like the F word, and I feel like that definitely reestablished those like even like gender norms and like sexual identity norms, where just reestablishing that like toxic masculinity or femininity, just I don't know, I feel like it definitely reestablished.
Absolutely. And that's the way that we normalize that type of discrimination, right? When I was a kid, the game was what? Smear the queer. I mean, I can't literally think of anything more present than that. I mean, that is what it is, right? And yeah, absolutely. Certain words used for certain folks. And I was a basketball coach when the boys were little for many, many years. And once when we were having a practice, one of the kids said, "That's gay," you know, and he meant that was, you know, wrong or what, or bad or something like that. And so, you know, of course, basketball coach is still a sociology teacher. So we all sat down in the circle in the middle of the gym. And I said, well, what if we were standing here and I passed the ball out of bounds and had a turnover and said, "That's straight." And of course, these kids are all in 3rd or 4th grade at that point, right? And so, yeah, we had an excellent conversation. I don't think anybody is too young to understand those dynamics, right? And the weight that maybe even some of those terms that I think were very interchangeable for that generation, and still carry weight with younger generations as far as like, that's how to say something's wrong or amiss or bad. Yeah, good. How else, how else are people having trouble with it, that older generation, or why do you think? And maybe that brings me to my other question, which is, what does it say about culture or gender that parents try, and because when I was a kid, when I was born in 1973, ultrasounds were not a thing. The technology was there. It was military technology. It was just beginning to be used in birthing and things like that. But that wasn't an option. You were surprised every time, right? And then now ultrasounds for maybe somebody's got an issue, but now it's just sort of 3D ultrasounds, you name it. What do you think it is? Somebody really, I'm bringing this up because somebody in my class yesterday identified it and I thought it was really good. And that was, what do you think it is that we want to genderize our kids before they're even out of the womb? Or what's that represent? Or what are parents trying to accomplish? Or
oh my gosh. Okay. I want to talk about this because I saw it, I kid you not, I think yesterday, and someone made a TikTok video about claiming that their baby was gay. Like, it was a very odd video to me because it was this mom ranting about how her 2-year-old son, not even 2, like toddler, she identified him as gay. And then she was talking about how she called her dad and she was like, "I want to let you know your grandson's gay." And he was like, "Well, how is he gay if you haven't let him, identify himself and let him grow up and identify who he is?" And she just kept going on and on about, "Nope, my son is gay." And I don't know. It was just very, very odd to me. And it was like, why do you assume babies are straight automatically? And I don't know. It was just very odd to me. I mean, a baby's a baby. Like, I don't know. It
I
was
think
just
I'm
so
pretty safe to say baby hookups are rare. So we're just not
Thank
even
you.
gonna have.
Thank you.
I'm gonna explain that one real quick. A, internet. B,
It was
TikTok. We don't even
honestly,
need to
I'll
go to
even
C.
link the TikTok. It was so freaking bizarre to me.
Yeah.
And just the fact this lady was going on a rant about how we automatically identify babies as straight. I was like, I don't think when we have a baby, we're automatically thinking about who they're attracted to.
No, but we do think about what gender we want them to be, or what gender we hope they are, or about what gender
Yeah.
we're going to ascribe. I mean, it's interesting to me that people seem nowadays to go to, I mean, if you're willing to burn down the state of California for a gender reveal party, it's jumped off the rails. Like we've just sacrificed a lot to know or reveal the gender. Yeah. Why do you think people do that? Why do you think that folks want to know? I mean, and this is a legitimate question. I'm a parent of 2 kids. Why do you think people want to know the gender of their kids, or assign a gender, more importantly, pre-birth or even at birth? And I mean spending money, painting rooms, buying clothes that are blue, whatever that might be. And I understand, I'm not being snarky about this whatsoever.
I think part of it is because we are just kind of taught in our culture that this binary of like male or female like really defines who we are. And that's how we know people. That's how we identify people. Whereas if we were born into a culture that recognized gender as a spectrum, I don't think it would be that big of a deal. But since we're taught like you are either male or female, and that's a huge part of who you are and your identity, I feel like it seems like such a big deal for parents to know like, who is my kid, you know? I don't know, I feel like we use gender as a basis of identity like way too much and ascribe all of this meaning to it when it doesn't need to be that way.
Yeah, and I'm not, Mackenzie said, if you don't cause a huge fire, it's fine. And yeah, obviously, you know, having a gender reveal party, human beings are going to try and have a party for whatever. I get that. I understand. So, okay, yeah. You know, does it tell us anything more about how we're going to treat our kids? Like, it's almost like it's a safety net, you know? And we know, as we've looked at it, sociologists have looked at it, and parents hold baby girls tighter. They hold them closer. They speak quieter to them, and they talk to them in ways that are very in quiet tones. We know that babies that identify, or that we identify as the gender male, we are more physical with them, like little babies, tossing them up in the air. We speak much more loudly to them. We're rougher. And I'm still talking about a baby. I'm not even talking about a 13-year-old, 2 13-year-olds. I'm talking about babies. So the way human beings immediately treat boys and girls, or how we identify gender, very different. So whether parents are just prepping for that as human beings, whether they're ascribing to those gender roles, whether they need to know something, you know, and I'm not saying that's a negative thing. Like, we need to know something that grounds us. Or is it a parent's first attempt to have control over you? Somebody said that yesterday. And I was like, like a parent's first attempt at, this is whatever this is, you know, like now that you're in this box, I can proceed from here on out or whatever. All right, good. Anybody have anything else to add to this? I did want to show a video that's just about 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes before we wrap up to get us thinking about this. Anything else? Anybody? Awesome. Well, I think it's, I love this chapter. And I love thinking about gender. And yeah. Well, I guess I'll go with that for today. Let me go ahead and screen share once I get this link pulled up here. Just gonna take me a second.
Are you over 25?
Are you over 25? 47, YouTube. Sorry. Is YouTube a dating app now? No, it's just an advertising platform. All right. So pause that. Hold on. And yeah, I got to get my screen share. Like, I got to get back to where I can do that without talking over it like an old man.
But first, allow me to acknowledge that I am not a sociologist. I'm also a straight white man who doesn't have to worry about a lot of the hate that a lot of other people do have to worry about. So my goal with this video is I want people to understand, because I think understanding will lead to less hate and also less self-hate. For a lot of people, it's not.
All right, I know it's early and he's had 10 times more coffee than any of us, but just, he goes fast here.
Just to imagine humans are simple, and that you can know a person's sex, and then you will know all sorts of things about them deeply and clearly. And if you don't fit into this nice little box, people who do can get really confused and sometimes even angry. And if you yourself don't fit into one of these nice little boxes and you think that people should, then you end up hating yourself. And that's probably even worse. I think the best and maybe only way to solve this problem is for people to understand that there are no nice shiny boxes. Or if there are shiny boxes, there are an infinite number of them, enough to put all of the people who currently exist, have ever existed, and will ever exist. So, together, let's understand. We're gonna start simple. What's going on down here in between the legs? That is your sex, your biological sex, and it tends to be binary, though there are all sorts of conditions that result in intersex individuals. And as interesting and complicated as this is, the rest of it is much more complicated, so I'm just gonna move on from here, because we all kind of get what sex is. Now we move on up to the top, to the brain, which is the thing that decides what gender you identify with, whether you feel like a man or a woman or neither or both, because the fascinating thing is, as much as we try to label things, there is no way to label every point on an infinite continuum, and that's what we're dealing with here. So, to actually visualize how this works, I've created a graph for you. On the x-axis, we have gender, male to female, and on the y-axis, we have the intensity of the identification with that gender. I would be about here, because I identify as a man, though I recognize that there are some womany parts of me, but let's also put a hypothetical biological female on the graph that identifies very strongly as a man. Now, that could be really uncomfortable, especially when there's a bunch of people in the world who insist on calling him a woman just because of the body that he happens to be very uncomfortable with, which is why sex does not determine the pronoun you should use. Gender does. Now, moving on to your heart, your metaphorical heart, of course. This is who you're attracted to. Men, women, all genders. Again, it's a spectrum, and that spectrum includes intensity, because there are people who don't feel strong sexual attraction at all. That's why asexual is a sexual orientation. A newer idea that I was happy to be exposed to yesterday on Tumblr is the idea of romantic orientation. These are the people that you want to have strong, intimate relationships with, but it sort of separates out the idea that sex has to be the goal or end point or like end all and be all of every intimate relationship. Now that we've dealt with how we feel, let's deal with what happens when other people actually get involved. Now, that's sexual behavior, which is actually very different from sexual orientation. Now, that might seem a little bit strange at first, but it's not. Consider, for example, a heterosexual priest. That priest's orientation is heterosexual, but because of his religion, his behavior is celibate. Here, we're not talking about the preference, we're talking about the behavior. Now, built on top of all of this are gender roles, which are built by societies, not by individuals. The obvious ones are masculine gender roles and feminine gender roles, but as all dichotomies are false dichotomies, this one is a spectrum too. Now that we've sort of gone over all of this, it's important to note that every single one of these categories is independent from each other. So a biological female can be a man who only has sex with women despite the fact that he's attracted to both men and women and kind of feels more comfortable in feminine gender roles. That may not be the most common combination of these factors, but it's certainly not weird. And another important point, many people move across these spectrums, sometimes from year to year, sometimes hour to hour. But what's really important is that we trust ourselves and we understand ourselves and we love and respect ourselves and we grant that same understanding and respect to the people around us. Because when the world becomes one of infinite continuums and those false dichotomies break down and those 2 shiny boxes break apart into 7 billion shiny boxes, it's actually pretty beautiful. John, I'll see you in 2.
All right. Good. Yeah, I think that's a great quick summary. And I've always, for years and years, it's funny, before that video and for years and years and years, I was calling it romantic orientation instead of sexual orientation. And that is really because we have to look at the dynamics that really hypersexualize the gay community, right? We have to understand that dominant culture really has seen it as sex is sort of the end all of that sort of entire relationship spectrum, which of course, it's not for almost every human being, right? All right, any questions or anything else, as we've got some, I think, 4 Top Hat questions today that are open till 8 p.m. They are usually some of the most interesting ones. Describe the female gender in a word, describe the male gender in a word, a couple other questions as well, trans question that's the same. And then I guess the other question is gender inequality a current social problem. So if you're still keeping up with Top Hat, please do that. And you know, if you look, like I said, in the back of your Top Hat thing, it's not going to reflect the percentage that's a 1-for-1. Meaning, if you click in once per class period that I open it up, you're good. Most people answer all of the questions, which I think is fantastic. But if you didn't answer a question, someday it might say you have a 90 or an 86% or whatever that is. That's not the correct percentage. And mostly, we're looking to see if you've been using Top Hat all semester long, and the people that have been faithfully, you know, are going to get max points for that. So no stress. It's just another way that I've sort of built into the class kind of a fail-safe, which is, you know, some extra points if something goes on and you don't perform or achieve the way that you want to. I don't think that, you know, things should just be a failure, or you shouldn't be able to attain your goals. Sorry, trying to get my camera to lighten up. Lighten up, camera. All right. Any questions about grading, finishing the semester? You should be reading this chapter right now. Check for announcements. I might drop a little quick video for us to watch as we think about gender, something that's, you know, that's interesting, but I'm not trying to pile up more stuff. We've gotten over that piece. We're on the very steep, very fast downhill to that number, or to that goal. Any questions? No? All right, 8:56. Thank you for showing your faces. Thank you for attending class. And what's that thing? What's that thing? What's that thing? What's that thing? I know that thing. I'm just messing with you. Be good people and do good things. Talk to you later, everybody. That's right. That's when they cue the music. Da, 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 da. Roll the credits. See you later, everybody. Credits rolling. You can go ahead and sign off. I'm just rolling credits, rolling credits, rolling credits. Doing the Vogue, 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 Vogue. Doing the thing. The other. See you later.